When a car tears out, it leaves behind skid marks. But what does a UFO leave behind? We're going back more than 50 years for this first one, and what's been called some of the most credible UFO evidence of all time. November 2nd, 1971. It's evening in the small town of Delphos, Kansas. 16-year-old Ron Johnson is on his family farm when he suddenly sees a bright mushroom-shaped spacecraft hovering nearby. Johnson runs to his parents, and they return just in time to see the craft disappearing in the sky. But back on the ground, they find this. Where the UFO allegedly hovered is an 8-foot wide ring with a whitish crust around the edge. And take a closer look. It looks like this ring is glowing. Harlan Inlow was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive on the scene.
It was a eye-opening surprise. Here's this white, dry ring, looks like a big donut, sitting in the middle of a mud field. We took statements, we photographed it, and we took actual soil samples.
Ron's mother, Irma Johnson, tells Harlan she touched the white substance, and instantly her fingers became numb. Meanwhile, 2 other eyewitness reports of the UFO that night are soon confirmed, leading Harlan to only one conclusion.
I am 100% convinced that an incident happened, and the way the family told us was credible.
But it doesn't end there. Journalist MJ Benaya says when it comes to reporting UFO landing sites, these strange sightings are not unique to Kansas.
We have multiple cases that show UFOs sort of landing on the ground. One of the most famous cases was out of the 1980s in France, in Aix-en-Provence, where a gentleman was farming in his field when he saw this large disc-like object take off into the sky. And again, it left impression marks as to where it was landed, as well as some burn marks on the ground.
With a 21-page soil report, the Delphos, Kansas UFO is considered one of the most lab-studied UFO cases in history. So you'd think if it was possible to explain this ring, it would have been done by now. But no dice. Well, we got our experts here to give it another try. We begin with astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio.
UFOs have been traditionally associated with heat, meaning this might have been ash, but there wasn't an excess of carbon ash that I could see in the chemical report. Some of the elements were hydrophobic in nature.
It's that hydrophobicity that tells physicist Dr. Matthew Shadagis something's up.
The term hydrophobic means water repellent. Most soil really needs water. That's how plants grow.
This photo taken of the Delphos soil sample about 20 years after the incident shows a drop of water repelling off it. So there seems to be something amiss in the soil, but is it really glowing? D'Antonio thinks there's an explanation in the camera.
It looks brighter on the film precisely because it's a brighter soil compared to the darker soil, and the camera tries to balance the light.
But Shadagis says a camera artifact doesn't explain further research from the soil report.
We have physical deposited evidence that the samples still have the same glowing property today, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me.
The evidence is leaning alien, but geologist Dr. Bob Anderson thinks what we're looking at is natural, a mix of an unknown organism and water creating a froth of bacteria.
I realize that this area is pretty conducive to this kind of thing, so I don't believe it has anything to do with the UFO. I think it's a natural phenomena of groundwater interaction in biology. It's a gas that's being released by that bacteria.
But what about the numbness in the mother's hand? Dr. Anderson thinks he can explain that too.
The mother got her hand burnt a little bit by touching that ring. That usually happens if you have an acid. It wouldn't surprise me that something got into the groundwater. My gut feeling is that there was something buried in that area that was man-made chemical, which would not show up on those 1970 soil surveys.
But still, why the ring shape? Dr. Shadagis points to another popular theory that we're looking at a so-called fairy ring. They're typically formed by fungus feeding on decomposing matter in the soil. The fungus then grows from the center outwards to form a ring.
Fairy rings are also known to have a hydrophobic effect on the soil. So this does appear to be a partial explanation that knocks out one or two features, but doesn't seem to fit the entire story.
From a fairy ring to a possible UFO landing and even acidic soil, there were just so many conflicting theories here, plus all those credible witnesses. Our verdict is that this is simply an unexplained phenomenon. Before you get any ideas to investigate, you should know that the family eventually buried the ring to discourage curious trespassers. But if you ever come across one yourself, you know who to call. February 2020. It's a sunny afternoon in Garden Grove, California. Typically, when Brian Schuler's kids tell him they've seen a UFO, he credits it to overactive imaginations. But on this particular day, when his son beckons him into the backyard, Brian also sees something strange. And he records this.
What is that?
An object floats in the sky overhead, consisting of two connected, metallic-looking shapes with a dark underside. And for the first time, Brian can't explain it away to his kids.
Looked like it had almost a glass front on it, and I couldn't tell what it was on the top. It moved towards my left side very slowly, and then past us, and it just moved in a very straight line out of distance.
Although the sighting leaves Brian perplexed, maybe he shouldn't be. Writer Amy Tidal explains Southern California's Orange County is historic when it comes to sightings of unidentified flying objects in broad daylight.
Orange County has one of the oldest daytime UFO sightings. In 1965, road maintenance engineer Rex Heflin saw what he thought was a UFO, so he whipped out a camera and shot some quick Polaroids of the object. Heflin initially brushed off what he saw, assuming that it was some kind of test by a nearby military base. But years later, experts looked at the photographs and confirmed that it wasn't some government technology. Both of these objects appear to be flying low in the sky. They were both sighted near telephone poles and near power lines. And they were seen roughly in the same area, so some might believe that there is a link between these two sightings.
The Heflin case was one of the most talked about UFO incidents of the 1960s. And when high-resolution prints of the original Polaroid pictures were reanalyzed 35 years later using the latest in digital technology, there were no indications of any tampering. Now, will the same be said of our backyard UFO? Let's see what the experts have to say. It was determined back in the 1960s that the object in Rex Heflin's photo wasn't military technology. But what about this one? If so, it's in the wrong direction.
There's Los Alamitos. The joint base is completely behind him. It's in the exact 180 degrees behind that individual, looking out to where the object is.
So could this be a drone used for military purposes?
I don't think that it's going to be a drone at all. It's not a symmetrical object. And besides that, it's flying next to a power line. Yeah, that wouldn't be too close. That's too close.
Okay, so no drone, but Hoffman does believe that the power line is a clue.
When you zoom in on it, you can clearly see that it has body parts and everything in it possibly hanging like a thread. I think it's a spider that's hanging from that line.
So we've got a spider. Mystery solved. But not quite. Astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio respectfully disagrees.
I think based on the fact that if you look at the clarity of this wire and how this isn't really that clear, what that means is this object is substantially further away than the wire. And the giveaway is that when we look at the video, you see insects flying around the wire. It's like those black gnats are flying around. This thing is much further away than that. So this here would be much bigger than that if it was an insect, but there's no visible corollary for this being any kind of animal whatsoever. Not even a soaring bird like a vulture that might circle in the air.
So what is it? Brian told us as he filmed, he didn't think it moved like a balloon. But D'Antonio says, not so fast.
And it looks like it's just floating there, but the thing is just gently coming toward the wire. And I believe where we have something that's floating lazily along in the sky, it looks to me like a mylar balloon. From the reflectivity down to the motion and the shape. The helium inside the balloon will eventually leak out, and you'll get these little creases and convolutions and changes in the brightness, and that could be what we're seeing here.
D'Antonio believes it's likely the balloon spelled out a word and strayed from an outdoor party.
This looks like it could be an H, but I see a lot of cases of these silver mylar balloons that get away, and I agree, it's odd looking. It's really odd looking.
Our verdict, we're going with partially deflated mylar balloon. We agree that the combination of light hitting the various crinkles in the balloon is what makes it look so oddly shaped in the sky. But is it an H or maybe a number? We'll leave that up to you to decide.